In this podcast episode, the host interviews John Alite, a former hitman and member of the Gambino crime family. He discusses his upbringing, involvement in organized crime, and the realities of being a hitman. John Alite grew up around gambling joints and was exposed to the world of organized crime from a young age. His father was involved in the gambling and boxing world, and Alite was introduced to various mobsters and gangsters. He started getting involved in hustling and card games at a young age, and his attraction to the lifestyle grew as he witnessed the money and power associated with it. Alite's transition to violence began around the age of 14, and he started getting involved in the drug business and criminal activities. He describes his first experience with violence, where he felt a mix of fear and the need to prove himself. As he became more involved in the criminal world, he started making a reputation for himself as a fearless and dangerous individual. Alite's association with the Gambino family began through his connections with various mobsters and gangsters. He worked with different bosses and had his own crew of around 100 guys. He also discusses the dynamics of the five families and the power struggles within the organized crime world. Relationship with John Gotti Jr. Alite met John Gotti Jr. at a young age and became friends with him. He describes the power dynamics and the challenges within the family, as well as the manipulation and strategic moves made by Gotti to solidify his position as the boss. Alite's involvement in violence and contract killings is a central theme of the podcast. He discusses the adrenaline rush and detachment that comes with taking a life, as well as the lack of remorse or emotional impact. He also talks about the power dynamics and the rules within the mafia, highlighting the betrayal and disloyalty that often occurs. The podcast delves into the glamorization of the mafia and the portrayal of gangsters in popular culture. Alite discusses how various figures, including Al Capone and Lucky Luciano, have contributed to the glamorization of the lifestyle. He also addresses the realities of being a hitman and the detachment from normal emotions and behaviors. Alite reflects on his regrets and the challenges he faced in the criminal world. He acknowledges the mistakes he made and the consequences of his actions, including the betrayal and disloyalty within the organization. He also discusses the power struggles and the manipulation that occurs within the mafia. Alite talks about his daily routine during his criminal days, which involved going out every night, drinking champagne, and doing drug business during the day. He also discusses the amount of money he was making, which he estimates to be in the millions. He talks about the various levels of violence in the criminal world, from beatings to killings, and the need to maintain control over drug territories and business. Alite also discusses the paranoia and fear that comes with living a life of crime, as well as the constant threat of being targeted by other criminals. He talks about the alliances he made with various gangs and organizations to make money, as well as the need to maintain control over drug territories and business. As the podcast progresses, Alite reflects on his past and the realization that the criminal life was not what he thought it was. He talks about the moment when he started questioning his involvement in crime, especially when he realized that the people he had protected and worked with were turning on him. He discusses the level of betrayal and the feeling of being abandoned by his associates, which led him to question the loyalty and integrity of the criminal world. Alite also talks about the moment when he was caught by the authorities and the charges he was facing, including murders, armed robberies, drug dealing, and shootings. He discusses the extradition process and the realization that there was no way out of the situation he was in. He reflects on the impact of reading statements from people who had turned on him and the feeling of betrayal and disillusionment that came with it. Alite describes the decision to leave the mafia as a difficult one, as he had been involved in the criminal organization for many years. He spent 3 years in a Brazilian prison where he faced harsh conditions and constant threats to his life. Despite the challenges, he remained loyal to the mafia for a long time before realizing that the organization was not loyal to him. The survival tactics he used in the prison, such as staying in touch with other inmates from around the world, helped him endure the difficult circumstances. Alite discusses the betrayal he experienced from his fellow mobsters who gave him up to the authorities. He talks about the trials and the testimonies against him, which ultimately led to his decision to leave the mafia. He also mentions the difficult conditions in the prison, including violence, lack of basic amenities, and the constant threat of death. Despite the challenges, Alite and other inmates managed to survive by sticking together and supporting each other. Alite acknowledges the impact of his time in the mafia on his mental health, including suffering from PTSD. He talks about the constant fear of being caught and the toll it took on his mental well-being. He also discusses the suicides of some of his fellow mobsters, highlighting the psychological impact of a life of crime. Alite reflects on the damage he caused to his family and the pain he experienced after losing his daughter to an overdose. He acknowledges the destruction and suffering caused by his actions and expresses regret for the pain he inflicted on others. He describes the constant agony and the struggle to cope with the loss, highlighting the need for understanding and empathy for those who have lost loved ones. Alite expresses deep regret for the life he led, acknowledging the suffering, loss of family, and the negative impact on his children. He believes in God and sees his experiences as a way to learn and grow, hoping to use his story to help others avoid similar mistakes. He also discusses the concept of karma, emphasizing the need to do good and make positive changes in life. Alite reflects on his efforts to change and the challenges he faces in overcoming his past. He emphasizes the importance of staying positive and being a motivational figure for others, particularly young people who may be considering a life of crime. He also shares a positive encounter with a man who helped an elderly person, highlighting the existence of good people in the world. The conversation touches on Alite's ongoing feud with a former associate, revealing the personal and financial disputes between them. Despite the conflict, Alite remains focused on his mission to spread awareness about the dangers of fentanyl and opioids, using his platform to advocate for positive change. Alite shares his insights on the consequences of a life of crime, emphasizing the need for young people to avoid following that path. He encourages them to pursue honest careers and avoid the suffering and loss that come with a criminal lifestyle. He also discusses his interactions with victims, families, and the emotional impact of those encounters.